Hello everyone. In this video we are going to talk about hyperlinks, which are really the cornerstone of the web, a bunch of documents that are all linked together, and you can click on those links to surf the net. So that's what the internet was based on. Okay, what we're going to do here is create a new sample file inside the HTML folder. So go ahead here in VS Code and right click on your HTML folder and then choose new file. And then let's name it hyperlinks.html. Just like that. Okay, and we'll go ahead and put in the starter code here. So I'll type in HTML and I'm going to choose the HTML version 5 starter code, and that'll give us this here. Now, we were just talking about relationships in the last video, and one thing I don't like for beginners is the way this indents the code, because it makes it hard to see the relationships. So what I'd like you to do here is go ahead and select the head element and the body element. Now those are children of the HTML element, so they should be indented like that. I just pressed the tab, I selected all those lines and then just pressed the tab button to indent them all. Okay, now let's go ahead and set the title element, so we can just make it say hyperlinks. And then we'll go down to the body element here, and usually there's an H1 or some sort of heading that basically does the same thing as, says the same thing as the title. Whoops, I spelled hyperlinks wrong up here. I'm going to fix that. And then down here, I'm going to add an H1 element. So type in H1 and hit enter, and we can make that say the same thing as the title. So that'll be a heading that's visible in the browser window that says hyperlinks. Okay, now we're going to talk about a few different types of hyperlinks right now. So we're going to divide this page up into 3 different sections, one for each type of hyperlink that we talk about. And we're going to use H2 elements for that. So underneath the H1, put an H2. And the first type of link that we're going to talk about are absolute links. So inside that H2 element, type in absolute links. All right, and then underneath that H2, now we can get started. To put a hyperlink on a page, you need to use an A element. A stands for anchor, and we used to call hyperlinks anchors, but I don't think anybody does that anymore. Now we just call them hyperlinks, but the A stands for anchor. So right here, go ahead and type in A and hit enter, and you can see right here that VS Code added an attribute, an href attribute to our A element, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first I want you to put some content inside of the A element. We're going to make this link to Google's homepage. So right here you can just make it say Google inside of the A element. That's the content. And now we actually add the URL as the value of the href attribute right there. So an absolute link, which is what we're using here, starts with HTTP or HTTPS. So we'll go ahead and do HTTP : and then 2 forward slashes, and then www.google.com. Okay, so when we load this in the page, this is what we're going to see. That's going to be what we can click on. And then the value of the href attribute is going to be where this link takes us to. So go ahead and press Control S to save your changes. And then you can open this page in the browser. So I'm right clicking on the background right there and choosing Open in Default Browser. Mine came up over here. I'm going to move it over to this monitor. And here you go. Here's our H1. Here's our H2, and then here's our hyperlink. And you can see that the browser underlines hyperlinks so that they kind of stand out and you know that you can click on them. So if you go ahead and click on that, it should take you to Google's homepage like that. All right, go ahead and hit the back button here. And then let's go back to VS Code. And I want to show you another attribute that you can add to your hyperlinks. So go back and find the A element here, the opening A tag, and then we'll add another attribute, and this one's called the target attribute. So go ahead and type in target equals and then your pair of quotation marks, and now these are the choices that I have to set the value of that target attribute. Excuse me. We're going to use the first one. It's underscore blank, and I don't know why they use that. But anyways, here's the effect that setting the target equal to underscore blank has. Save your change, and then go over to the browser and refresh the page with F5. Okay, and now it looks the same, but look at what happens when I click on this link here. It actually opened it up in a new browser tab. So that's what happens when you add that target attribute and set it to underscore blank. Now that's important because when you link to pages that are on other websites, you often want to do this and open up the new page in its own browser tab, and that will keep people on your website over here in the original tab. So one strategy in the web for a website is to try and keep your visitors on your website as long as possible. So when you have a hyperlink that goes to a different website, then you might want to open it up in its own tab, and so that people don't forget about you over here. They'll still see this tab. And yeah. Okay, now, so an absolute link is always going to start with HTTP or HTTPS, and we usually use absolute links. We have to use absolute links if we're going to link to a page on another website. If we're linking to a page on our own website, we use what's called a relative link. Okay, so underneath our A element right there, let's add an H2, our subheading, and this section is going to be about relative links. So you can type in a content of relative links like that. Okay, now while absolute links, you use them to link to pages on other websites, we usually use relative links to link to a page that's within the same website that we have here that we're working on. So we still use an A element, so go ahead and type in A and hit enter. And then let's see, what do we want to do here? Let's link to our index HTML file that's inside the web programming folder. That's this one right down here. Okay, so first let's set the content inside the A element, and we can just make it say like homepage, because that's going to be like a link to our homepage for this site that we've been working in here. And now let's set the href attribute. Now with relative links, what we have to do is set the value of the href attribute to what we call a path that takes us from where this file is, the one that has the link in it, to our destination. So here I can see my folders and files here. Here's the page that we're working in here, hyperlinks.html. What we'd have to do to get to this page is we'd first have to step up a folder. So we're working inside the HTML folder. If we step up a folder, it would take us into this web programming folder here. Whoops, I'm trying to stretch this out so we can see it here. Once we're in the web programming folder, then we can find our destination right there. Okay, so the first step in our path is going to be to go up a folder. To do that with a relative link, the first step in the path is going to be .. That would take you up a folder. Okay, and now VS Code is helping us from there. So what we can do there is choose our destination, index.html. Okay, so this is what we call a path, and it's relative because it's relative to where we're starting, which is in the HTML folder. That's where this file is. Okay, and then each step in a path is separated by a /. So let's just check this out, and we'll try another one in just a second here. But go ahead and save your changes, Control S, Alt Tab back to the browser, and refresh the page. And there we go. Here is our link, and if I click on it, it should take me to our home page for our web programming folder, which is right here. Okay, go ahead and click the back button to get to the page we're working on. Let's add another one here. Let's do this. Now let's put a new line here, and let's add another A element. So I'm typing in A and hitting enter. In this case, why don't we go to the index page that's inside the JavaScript folder? Okay, So here's our starting point, hyperlinks.html. In order to get to that index page in the JavaScript folder, we have to go up, and that would take us from the HTML folder into the web programming folder. So our path is going to start with .. And then the next step in the path would be to step into the JavaScript folder. And then once we get in there, we can find our destination, which is this index.html page. So here's what the path is going to look like. First, we want to go up a folder like that. And then we want to step into the JavaScript folder. And then from there, our destination is index.html. So I'm going to type that in, and that'll be the value of our href attribute. That's the path to get from here to our destination. And then why don't we make the content inside the A element just be JavaScript. Okay, let's try that. Save that, and then go back to the browser, refresh the page. Oh, and look at this. By the way, A elements are inline, so they don't stretch out to take up a whole line. They fall in line like this. We'll fix that in just a second here, but go ahead and click on that JavaScript link. Okay, and it should take you to the home page for the JavaScript folder, or the default page for the JavaScript folder. And remember that an index.html file is what we call the default page for a folder, and it usually acts as a table of contents for other pages that are in that same folder. So here is a list of all the worksheets that are in the JavaScript folder, which we'll be getting to later in the course. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hit the back button here. And let's put a line break in between these links right here so that we can make it a little bit easier to read. So we'll go back to VS Code here, and I'm just going to put my cursor right there in between those two A elements, and I'm going to put in a BR element. Remember, that'll give us a line break. So now if I save it, not a big deal here, but if I save it and reload the page over here, you'll see that each of those links gets put on its own line. Okay, so again, we use absolute links when we want to link to a page on a different website, and we usually use relative links when we want to link to a page that's on the same website as the one we're working in. All right, the third type of link that we're going to talk about are called in-page links. So let's go ahead and put our cursor right there underneath the last A element that we added, and then we'll add another H2 here. So type in H2 and hit enter, and we're going to talk about in-page links. So we'll put this for our content inside of that H2 element, in-page links. Okay, now this is going to get a little bit messy. We need to add a bunch of content to this page so that our page scrolls. So here's what we're going to do. See, follow along with this, but this will get a little bit messy. Underneath that H2 element, let's pretend that we're creating a page that's made up of a few different sections of content. So what I'll do here is let's add an H3 element right there, and let's just call this section 1. I'm keeping it generic. We'll just say it's section 1. Okay, and then we also, in order to do what we want to do here, we need to add an ID attribute to this H3 element. And we haven't talked about ID attributes yet, but we'll be talking about them more soon. But they allow you to identify specific elements on a page. So anyway, just go with me on this, and we'll cover ID attributes a little bit more later in the course. But we want to add an ID attribute to that H3. And you can come up with your own IDs. I'm just going to call this S1. So that's short for section 1. Okay, so, and then this, we do need a lot of content here so that it forces our page to have scroll bars. So underneath that H3 here, let's add a paragraph. So type in P and hit enter, and then split the two P tags apart like that, because we're going to put content in between them. And now here's a trick that you can do to create dummy content. If maybe you're working on a page and you don't have the final content, but you just need some dummy content so you can see how it lays out on the page, you can do this trick in VS Code. If you start typing LO and then hit enter, that'll put a bunch of gibberish just to give you some dummy content. Now this is called lorem ipsum. If you've ever worked in graphic design, you would know about this, because graphic designers use this a lot when they're waiting for the real content. Okay, anyways, it basically just puts a bunch of gibberish inside of our paragraph here so that we have some dummy content. Okay, now I need quite a bit more content than this because we're trying to get the page to have scroll bars. So what I want to do is another trick right here. Let's put our cursor right on that line that we just added, that lorem ipsum, and then we'll copy this line down a few times by using Alt, Shift, and down arrow. So I'm pressing Alt, Shift, and down arrow, and each time I do that, it copies that line down. Do it like 10 times or quite a few times, something like that. Okay, so we've got a big, huge paragraph right here. Okay, let's save it and then Alt tab back to the browser and see what it looks like over here. So I reload the page. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now I think what we're going to want to do is add another section here. If you make the browser window real skinny with by adjusting the window size like that, you can make it the scroll even more because the text will wrap. Okay, all right, we're getting there. Let's Alt tab back to VS Code and let's create one more section. So to do this, we're going to copy the H3 element and the paragraph element. So copy those two elements. And then just so select those two elements and do Control-C to copy them. And then put your cursor underneath that closing P tag. And then go ahead and paste right there. I'm being careful to keep my code indented nice and neat. We talked about that in the last video. And now we'll take this H3, the one that we just copied, and we'll make it say section 2. And we'll set its ID to S2 like that. Okay, now why did we add these ID attributes? So what we want to do is we want to be able to jump to these specific spots on the page. So in order to do that, we had to ID them, or in other words, add ID attributes to them. Okay, you may have seen this if you go to a page on the net that's really big and long. It might have a table of contents right at the top of the page. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So scroll up to right here where our H1 element is. And let's, right there underneath the H1 element, let's add an ordered list. So we'll type in OL and hit enter. And then split those two tags apart by pressing the enter key. We're going to put LI elements inside of them. So go ahead and add an LI element. So type in LI and hit enter. And then inside of this LI element, I want to add a link that's going to take us down to section 1. So right here inside the LI element, type in A and hit enter. Okay, and then I'm going to fill in the content in between the opening and closing A tags here. And that's going to say section 1. So this is going to be a link that takes us to section 1. Okay, and now to set the href attribute so that we jump to section 1, I have to put a hashtag and then S1. So S1 was the ID. That's the ID of the element that we want to jump to. And then this hashtag is required for in-page links. I don't know why, but it's just one of the syntax rules for adding an in-page link to the page here. Okay, so let's also add another item to this list that jumps to section 2 here. So I'm going to do the Alt-Shift down arrow trick again to copy that line down. And then I'm going to change this to hashtag S2 instead of S1, and I'm going to change the content here to section 2 like that. Okay, go ahead and save the changes here, and then Alt tab back to the browser, hit refresh, and we'll scroll up to the top here. So here's our table of contents, and if I click on section 1, you can see that it takes me right to section 1. That's where this is where we planted that ID. Okay, if I scroll back up to the top and click on section 2, it takes me down to section 2 right there. Okay, so those are called in-page links. And I want to show you something. I'm going to stretch the browser window out here, and it changes the URL. Look at that. So when we jump to S2, it adds the hashtag S2 to the URL in the browser. I'm going to do this to jump to section 1 right here. And you, well, it didn't do it there. That's strange. Did I? Oh, there we go. I'm not sure why I didn't do it the last time. But anyways, you can see that the URL changed to hashtag S1 right there. So what I could do is I could jump to a section on a page and then copy this hyperlink and email it to a friend. And then when they follow the link, they would end up right at that section, right at that spot in the page. Alrighty, so there you go. Those are the 3 types of links that we'll be working with throughout this course here. Absolute, relative, and in-page links. You should be ready to do the hyperlinks worksheet now. All right, that'll do it.